So, welcome everyone to the last session of today's Routing Security Educa program by RIPE NCC. This session is called the Future of Routing Security, and it's my pleasure to welcome Cristel, Russ, and Tim. Hi guys. Hi girls. So the interesting thing about this session is that we wanted to try a panel discussion, but because we are limited by the online technology, I'm not sure how is this going to work. This is the first time that we are doing this. So in order to make to start off things, we will have a little presentation by all three speakers, and then in the end we will have an opportunity for them to ask each other questions and also to take the questions from the audience, and I have some questions prepared too. So let's see how that goes. And to start with, we will have these presentations. The slides are uploaded, and I'm asking you to stick to the time of like 7 to 10 minutes so that there will be enough time for the discussion later on. And for me personally, what is exciting about the setup of today's session is that we have kind of different sides of this complex problem represented here. We have a network operator, we have an academic researcher, and then we have Tim from RIPE NCC who has had several hats. He is involved in the standards development, but he's also a project manager at the RIPE NCC of our software developers, so people who are supposed to implement the things that the network developers, the network operators need and the academics come up with. And so it would be really curious to hear the different aspects and maybe to have a discussion later on. So let's start as it was on the agenda with the presentation from Russ first. Thank you.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Let me see if I can share this document, how this is going to work. I have to find it. And I will move through these slides very, very quickly. I hope these are right. Yep, these are right. So I've been tilting at this windmill for almost 20 years long, maybe even longer. Jeff Houston and I were talking about this last night, in fact, about how long we've been playing with this problem space. So I'm Russ White. I work at LinkedIn. You can find me at rule11.tech, the Network Collective, and a bunch of other places. I'm pretty easy to find if you want to find me, so I won't do that. Talking to providers over the last 20 years or so, I see a few requirements operationally, like no single point of failure, don't replace the edge. In other words, I can't replace boxes on the edge, it's too expensive. Don't tell operators how to run their networks, don't slow down convergence, and be quiet. And what I mean by be quiet is just that you don't release operational information unless it's absolutely necessary. This is a huge argument in the operational space about how much information should be released through this type of BGP security process. So here's some reality checks. RPKI, I know you've heard a lot about RPKI today. There are general worries about scale on RPKI that you may or may not have heard during the presentations. There are questions about information rot, the same problems we have with the IRRs. There's been some recent research, I think, in this area. My impression is RPKI is a good thing, but it probably won't be universally deployed no matter how hard we try. And it doesn't solve path validation. Graph overlays were one option at a time. It's been killed by the community by and large. A lot of security researchers don't consider it perfect. It's plausibility, so they don't feel like going down this path, or they don't support going down this path. BGP-SEC, which is what you'll probably be hearing more about in the future, is by most providers that I've talked to completely undeployable. It actually leaks a lot of information into the wild that people don't realize it does. It doesn't actually solve the problem at hand, and there's a lot of pain for too little gain. So my question is there a solution? Can we solve 80% of the problem while keeping to the things that we need to do in this space? So this is kind of a modest little thinking proposal. I'm not even going to do the last slide because it's just like an analysis of this slide, which is that we try to combine a lot of things together, and we use some sort of an open source software solution that combines information from the RPKI, because I think the RPKI is good, but I think we could add the first hop AS to the RPKI into the ROA, and that would solve a lot of the problems that we're having and one-hop back attacks and stuff like that. Then you add that to maybe RIRs and public IRRs that are using RPSL or something like that, and you maybe find some way to sign that data. And then you add to that private IRRs. For instance, LinkedIn uses several upstream providers. Maybe if we could get signed IRRs from those upstream providers or trust those private IRRs, then we could do table analysis using things like RIPE Atlas, OpenBMP, and other tools. And we could combine these all through a local policies engine that would allow us to locally validate route information that would give us the control over our routes the way we have them today, but provide us more information that would allow us to be more intelligent about what we accept or don't accept. So like I said, there's another slide there, but just like an analysis slide. You can download it and look at it later. And I'll turn it over to Vesna. Who's next? I'm not sure who to pass it over to. Is it Tim or is it Cristel?
Thank you very much.
Okay.
It is Cristel now.
Okay, Cristel.
Okay, do you hear me? Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Cristel, loud and clear.
Okay. Okay, but I can't hear you. Okay. I'll share my screen again. You were able to see my slides? So I start? May I start? You see my slides?
Your slides? Go ahead, Cristel, take it away.
Okay, okay, okay. So here I'll talk about two aspects of routing security that I think are important to look from now on. And these are how to do, because we don't have full deployment of route origin validation and path validation, we need to do some mitigation, either for hijacks, but also for DDoS attacks. And often this is done via BGP. So how do we secure the mitigation? Well, and then also how to verify data plane. It's mostly I won't talk about how to do it, but I will do the problem statement. So we've done this characterization of how what are the existing solutions to protect against hijacks, against DDoS, and we see that most protection and mitigation solutions, if they don't rely on ROAS and route origin validation or on BGP-SEC, they require often that we advertise something in BGP, but because this is not secure, we have an issue. So that's the first statement. If we need to mitigate using BGP, we need to secure that. We need to be able to authenticate the mitigation and also see that verify that its integrity. Also, some protection techniques, they rely on historical data to determine that there was an attack, a hijack, for example. So if so either a hijack or so they rely on historical data to detect hijacks. But then if we need to mitigate and so advertise a prefix from different locations from a mitigation service, then we see a new AS path. And these AS paths are new valid paths, but it breaks all the historical the solutions that rely on historical data. So now the second problem that I think important to look at is data plane path verification. So what do I mean by that? Is that you have a BGP path, okay, that you learn. So if you are AS3, you learn a path from AS2, and you may have some malicious AS, for example AS2 here, who will pretend he's directly connected to his AS0, while in fact he needs to send the traffic to AS1 to reach AS0. So AS3 receives the path via AS2, then AS0, while in fact the traffic will go from AS3 to AS2 to AS1 and then AS0. So it's cheating to attract the traffic to him. So AS2 is cheating to get the traffic, while AS3 could have sent directly the traffic to AS1. So how can we detect these? And well, a way to do this is to use trace routes to do this. But then, yeah, so you can use trace route to do this. So we built a small experiment where we have a BGP feed and we use Scamper to do trace routes, and we are comparing the BGP feeds and trace routes to see if the AS level paths are the same in BGP and trace routes. And we observe strange things. So one of example is here we have a BGP route and in blue, and then in green you have the trace route. And you can see the BGP route goes via C, while the trace route goes via X and Y. So the question is it ASB that is cheating? Why does ASB advertise the route via C, but in fact sends our traffic to ASX? So is it cheating, or is it some unpredicted interactions between routing protocols? So the takeaway questions for here are how to secure mitigation techniques and how to attribute mismatches when you have a mismatch between BGP and trace route AS level paths. Okay, and these are my co-authors.
Hi, thank you, Cristel. Since I heard in the data channel that you might have to leave earlier, I will use my moderator privileges and ask you a question. Can you hear me? Okay,
Yes,
so the question is actually, well, kind of two questions. One is it possible to use RIPE Atlas instead of Scamper? And is it possible either with using Scamper or using RIPE Atlas to use this for operational purposes to generate alerts based on the findings that you see in the changes of the path detected by this trace route measurement?
So the first question about RIPE Atlas, we will move to RIPE Atlas. We hope to move to RIPE Atlas, but there is one problem we have to solve to move to RIPE Atlas is that we need the BGP feed and the probe to be at the same location, to have the same view. And so when we have solved that issue, we can use RIPE Atlas.
Okay.
And then for the second question, yes, the aim would be to be able to, so at the moment we generate a list of mismatches, okay? And so these can be seen as alerts. So here what we did in our case is we contacted our provider, the provider of that probe, and we asked them what they were doing to understand the problem. Okay, so we generate a list of prefixes for which we see a mismatch, but then it's not automatic. It's not automated yet to understand. So from the list to do the interpretation, we still have to work on that aspect.
Okay, thank you very much. And also in your slides, I didn't see a link to where can we find more information. So if you could send that to us later on the chat, that would be nice for the people that are interested. And now if you can take a look at the chat, there are some questions and more information for you there. So if you have some time, you could type maybe the answers and we can move on to Tim, and then we can have questions from Russ and Tim, maybe to you and to each other later on.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, I think the problem got fixed. All right, sorry. With that delay, let me kick off this presentation. Sorry. Well, we talked a lot about origin validation today, but while it may have some benefits, it's not enough, let's say. Especially because ASNs can be faked and root leaks, policy violations happen. Well, Ross, bear with me. I'll come back to your point of view. But before getting there, I wanted to talk a bit about BGPSEC, because people may not know what it's trying to do. So BGPSEC is leveraging the API in that every ASN has a private key, and the public key of that accompanying that is published in the API. So you know which public key goes with an ASN. So what that allows for is that in BGP you could sign an update as an ASN, then the next hop can sign basically that it pass that on to the next hop. And if everything is okay that way, you can see that no ASNs were spoofed. You don't know if this is according to policy or not. You just know that no ASNs were spoofed. So nobody lied. That's essentially what it's trying to achieve. Because if there's an evil ASN in the middle which is unable to produce a signature, well, they cannot add this, and then you can notice this further down the path. And actually, the signature provided here by the originating ASN would also be removed in this regard, because I'll get to that on the next slide again. But if you would partially signed paths, that would make for an easy downgrade attack. You would just pretend that you have no ability to sign, and then you get away with not having the key. So, well, so this has been developed in the ITF for many years. You can ask yourself, why doesn't it deploy? Well, there are some issues here. I think, first of all, to be honest, this was regarded, in my opinion, too much as a data problem with a very fundamental view of how security should work. I mean, from a data perspective, the protocol works that way. But there are some restrictions that are just too hard. It takes a lot of computing. Routers need to do signing. Routers need to validate. So there are reference implementations in Bird and Quagga because they run on big machines with CPUs, but not on hardware routers. And there have been experiments to see how long it would take to load a full routing table, and well, it would go up to 45 minutes, which I believe is just unacceptable. Also, because of the downgrade attack, everybody needs to participate. So that really gets in the way of incremental deployment. So I don't see this going anywhere soon, despite the fact that a lot of effort was put into making a system that by itself looks really nice. But maybe if the internet was started this way, it could have worked. Supposedly, if we had the CPUs back then. But given that we have an existing system, I don't see this fitting in easily. So what's next? I don't usually wear a suit, by the way, but imagine this is me looking at my crystal ball. My crystal ball is maybe not better than yours, but let me attempt. So first of all, I think we need to really respect the rules and issues that people have in this game. So providers are currently already doing protecting their reputation, and they don't want to abet, aid and abet in this, misconduct. At least to a degree, I think, especially in the RIPE region, we see quite a lot of this. IXPs are willing to offer security as a service, let's say, but they do remain neutral by and large, so leave it to members to figure out if they want to use things. Transit providers are not keen. I think in part this is because it goes against their revenue stream, but there's also arguments being made about net neutrality, and well, I don't know if that should argue against security, but it's there. Now stubs, what I mean by that is content providers. At least I've spoken to one or two of those who are actually willing to do origin validation, let's say, even if they have no alternative route because they want to block traffic that is more likely to be bad, let's say. So there is some willingness. Why do this in the first place? Because, well, I think it's an important question to answer if you're going to try to improve security. I mean, why do it? Because we can all say it's for the good of the internet, but I don't think that that's going to cut it. It has to solve problems that people have. So open questions that I have is, will resource holders demand that their addresses are not hijacked, that people could protect against this, and they don't. Will content providers demand that bad traffic is blocked earlier on? Will regulators step in if the technical community does not solve this issue? Other restrictions. Well, from a technical point of view, I think we need to look at something that allows for incremental update as, an additional thing to ongoing process or ongoing practice that already happens. It must not require new hardware. I think it needs to be, well, as easy as can be. Propagations must be fast because we're doing these fast things with anti-DDoS and in other cases. And ultimately, I think, for this to get anywhere, it must be so easy that there's really no excuse that, not to do it, which is a big challenge, admittedly. So looking at my crystal ball again, I really have no idea what's going to happen next, but I do know that there is currently an effort that I think is worth mentioning. So that's basically AES sets done in RPKI, or AES cones, I maybe should say. It's doing something similar as to what's happening today, at least, except that it's simplified. This is an effort that Job Snijders and Massimiliano Suki are working on together, and Massimiliano is sitting next to me here. Actually, if people have questions, I might pass it on. Essentially, what we're trying to do here is get an authoritative signed statement by an AES about their policy. And the advantage over getting this from IRR or PeeringDB or sources like that is that it can be retrieved more easily, let's say. You can be more easily find a policy signed by a particular ASN if you went down this path. But it's not providing the absolute certainty, let's say, that BGPSec is trying to do about, did nobody lie in this path. It's trying to basically offer an improvement over already existing practices with regards to AES path, such that you can look like, does this look like a plausible path according to policies? So I do believe that it allows for partial uptake. So you could verify that a path you see matches an intent, let's say. So here is 65,001 says I do send updates to 65,002 and I don't send customers. Here 65,002 is doing the same, and it's all looking good. Now, a leak might happen when AS 65,002, for example, said I do send updates, but not a particular customer, and it happened anyway. So a mistake happened. It can be recognized, let's say. And you could leverage this even further, and you could say, if I declare my upstreams specifically, and there's one that I didn't mention, then you could argue, well, that's a non-declared upstream, so something wrong may have happened here. Maybe somebody tried to inject themselves. Or repent me. So obviously this needs a lot more discussion, but I did want to raise it here as like, okay, there is thinking going on about can we leverage the signatures that we have in RPKI, where we can make strong authoritative statements about, the holder of this particular resource says something in a different way than what has been done with BGPSec until now. And with that, oh no, okay, well, that's basically what I said here. So Important to mention here as well is that with origin validation with RPKI, you have a validator that does the legwork for crypto. Something similar could work here. And I think, in fact, that's probably the way to go, because I don't think we can do crypto and signing, etc. on routers. I think it will just put too much of a burden on the hardware. So that was the last point I didn't make earlier, but yeah. Okay, I think I said most of the things on this slide, and in time of interest of time, I will leave it here and end this and go over to questions to me or anybody else.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, everyone. And now we heard all of our three speakers, and some questions are being asked and answered and going back and forth in the chat, mostly for Cristel for now. And since we have a limitation on having me and Tim speaking at the same time, we have to somehow solve this. So I will pose some questions and then I will shut up, and then Tim and Russ and Cristel can talk a little bit and have a discussion. And so my question to Tim basically is, what are the next steps? So for the people who are looking forward to this solution that you proposed, as I understood, it's not yet suggested as a draft or as an RFC in IETF. So can people already take part in helping you to work on this? And if they want to implement it, how can they go on with that? And for all the speakers, if you don't have very concrete questions or comments to each other, I want to throw these questions out there, and then if you want to pick it up, you can. If you don't, you don't have to. You talked mostly about the very near future, like what can people do next year to secure their existing networks. But what about the far future? So this is what people come up with, and some of the technologies that people are throwing around when talking about routing security is quantum security. And so there is a quantum internet hackathon coming up. I will share the URL in the chat soon. So in October we will have the quantum internet hackathon. How feasible is that? How realistic is that? And then there is another one, and which is blockchain. So using blockchain for everything, including routing security. So take it away.
So first of all, regarding the draft, Max is also in the chat, so he may say something more about it. It's ongoing work. We're looking at what data you would need to have statements about first, and they're working on a prototype there. And Max, maybe you can share when that is going to be ready to be published, but I don't think it will be years. I think we're talking months earlier than that, more likely. So, and if you have direct questions about this, I think Max is probably the better person to direct your questions about to. So then,
Max, I don't know if you saw them.
Well, there were a lot of other questions there. What are you signing? You want Russ to go now? Okay, Russ, over to you, and then we can go on to the other questions.
Okay. So two things. Max, if you need help with the draft, let me know. Second of all, when you start talking about blockchain, I think the problem with technology hype is, and remember that I'm actually involved in a blockchain company or two, so it's not like I'm beating up on blockchain here. But we need to think about the problem we're trying to solve when we think about blockchain. And I think that what we end up in a lot of times with blockchain is that we think we can just throw it at the problem and it'll solve it. But in the case of BGP security, we need to actually think through what it is we're trying to solve. And there are two types of problems in BGP security. One is validating or making sure the information is reasonable or valid, or how would I say it, seems to be true or is probably true. It's plausible is a word to say. The other is, has BGP protocol actually been followed? And these are two totally separate questions. And I'm not certain that blockchain, when you start thinking about how to apply blockchain to it, you need to think about how you would apply it to both of those problems separately, or whether one of them even matters. I mean, like, in my opinion, the problem is making sure the information is plausible. It's not making sure BGP protocol has been followed. I mean, whatever with BGP protocol stuff. So that's kind of my opinion on blockchain, if that kind of helps you, Vesna, with that question.
May I speak? So I had a question for Russ, and I think it's also related to the blockchain. Is if you use the blockchain to secure something, you need to publish things about yourself. And so my question for us is, you mentioned that using BGP-SEC is revealing too much for ASs. And I'm wondering why too much, because what we secure is the AS path, which is already present in BGP feeds.
Right. So here's the problem with BGP-SEC in that realm. There's only two ways of deploying BGP-SEC. One is to have a private key, public key pair per AS, right? Which means that all of your edge eBGP speakers need to have the same private public key pair installed on them, which is a huge security exposure that most ASs with thousands of edge routers are simply not going to accept. Then your other option is to have a per eBGP speaker private public key pair, which now increases, like even for LinkedIn, we have over 1,000 peers. Now I have 1,000 private public key pairs. So now when you go to look at the AS path and you start trying to disentangle the AS path out of BGP-SEC, you have this problem of, okay, now I have to not only have one private public key pair to search through per AS, it's per eBGP speaker in the entire internet. That's really not scalable. The other thing is, if I know which eBGP speaker of LinkedIn's actually sent this route, I now can figure out who you're paired with on which specific router or which specific POP. That's a huge information leakage that nobody talks about from BGP-SEC. And so, yeah, I mean, this is why I get back down to the question of, is this about BGP operation, or is this about actually validating the database that I'm passing it around, right? And what am I doing here, right? So that's really the question we have to come back to a lot of times.
Okay, thank you.
So coming back to reality, there was a question in the chat from Ralph saying, is it not true that by nature dynamic inter-AS routing is susceptible to the man-in-the-middle rerouting? So who wants to pick up this question?
So I guess I'll start. Practically, yes. Well, I should put it this way. Theoretically, yes. Practically, the whole AS path average in the internet is 4 hops. That's the average AS path length. Now, there are long tail distributions there in some areas, but by and large, it's 4 hops. So yeah, man in the middle is technically possible, but it's much more difficult just because of the scoped range of the 4 AS hop average in the internet, and that you typically see one of only like 12 or 15 providers in your AS path in the center, in one of those 2 center hops. So yeah, it's theoretically possible. In fact, it's theoretically really easy. In practice, I'm not convinced it's as easy as it seems to do. But that's just my kind of opinion about that question.
Professional, you're pointing at me about this one. No, I'm not sure. I mean, I'm as said, I'm not a network operator, so in that regard, I think Ross's answer is probably better than mine. That being said, from a security angle, I think we need to accept that it can happen, and I think you'll want to work on solutions that flag this as something that might be normal or not. So that would be my view on it.
So, hear me, right? Okay. So for men in the middle, it's probably much harder to detect as well. Often it's because someone hijacked a BGP session, and there, unless you look at RTTs, it would be much harder to detect. So there is very few, apart from the demo cases, there is very few cases. In fact, I don't know any cases that were reported of man in the middle attack where, BGP session was hijacked.
Thanks. Can you put me? Okay, so thanks everyone for these answers and for the discussion. And this reminds me of the fact that this year is actually the 10 years anniversary of the YouTube hijack incident, which was probably mentioned today several times. It happened in 2008, and so 10 years ago, it was kind of proven how crucial the BGP security and routing security is. And since we are talking about the future of the routing security, I wonder how will the internet look like in 10 years from now? And what are we going to talk about then when we look like 20 years back and 10 years back? So if you have some final thoughts about this, I would like to hear them, and then we can close this session and actually finish the whole day. So some thoughts on this. Thank you.
So there was a AIESEC report on hijacks and outages that said that there were around, I think, 14,000 hijacks and outages in 1 year. But there is no study about the evolution. Okay, so, but as people get more and more aware of what you can do with BGP and how vulnerable it is, it may increase, I guess. That's my guess.
Yeah, so personally, I'm really much more focused on the immediate future because I'd like to make things a little bit better as soon as we can. Long term, I don't know. I think networks will become smarter and smarter. I think BGP is probably going to stay there between networks, but a lot more invisible magic stuff is going to be software defined, including security and what have you and policy. But I don't know. For the time being, though, I'd like to focus on small steps we can take to make things a bit better.
So I don't have many comments on the YouTube hack other than just saying, Stefan actually put in the chat window there, should we just assume that routing security is impossible when we are patching the unpatchable? So I think in the short term, what we need to do is we need to focus on 80% solutions. We need to solve what we can solve and get it done. And, we built the internet doing 80% solutions. We had Paul Michapichis on talking about DNS. DNS was an 80% solution. SMTP was an 80% solution. You know, let's do 80% solutions that are flexible into the future, and let's run with it and see where it goes. Maybe 80% is enough in this case to make the internet, you know, you're not trying to solve the problem. It's like when you put door locks on your house, right? You're not trying to keep the guy from breaking into your house, or the girl or whatever, to breaking into your house. You're trying to get them to move to another house. It sounds horrible, but it's the truth, right? We just want to move people off doing BGP attacks and make them find other ways to attack the network so we can defend against those attacks in the future. We just want to make it harder than it is. And you know, I think that's where we really need to focus. So are we patching the unpatchable? Sure, in some sense, hop-by-hop routing by its nature is attackable in these ways. It's just the way it works. And if you want circuit-based switching, then please go back to pre-internet days and make that work. But we have the internet we have today. Packet switching is wonderful. We've got to deal with the security flaws that are in it and just do what we can to fix what's there. That's kind of my thinking.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. I actually like this solution, and I'm sorry to say to Stefan, that's a bit too pessimistic what you said. Like, shall we just assume that routing security is impossible? 80% is good enough, and I think that the prettiness of Russ's modest proposal is actually in its modesty, and the fact that it has to be a combination, it has to be a combined effort of all the players, and it's not something that can be branded and that somebody runs away with it and say, we are the only one who can run the routing security as a solution. So what I like about it is the combination of many smaller solutions that solve a bit of a problem, and then you have to talk to other people to actually make it work. And exactly that's how the internet came to be and how it is functioning. So I'm happy to finish this day on that conclusion, and we will have somebody else coming to say goodbye to everyone. And for now, this session about the future of routing security is over. Thank you, Russ. Thank you, Cristel. Thank you, Tim. And thanks everyone for participating, asking questions, and being awesome. Bye-bye.
I think you should be hearing me by now. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, okay, good. So I'm chipping in just for a few moments before Sandra closes the whole day. Just to inform you that after this Educa was focused on routing security. You can already mark on your calendars on the 6th of June. We will have another Educa, but it will be focused on IPv6. It will be focused on what happened also 6 years ago, almost 6 years ago, on the 6th of June 2012, there was IPv6 World Launch Day, or World IPv6 Launch Day, depends on the how you look at it. And we will have an Educa focusing strictly on IPv6. So start marking it on your calendars. And then I will just leave more space to Sandra. Sandra wants to close the day. And then bye.
Thank you, Mark. Well, and it's true, we actually were very happy with how successful the whole day was for us, and I hope you also had the same feeling throughout the day. So I want to thank really all the speakers for taking the time to present their work and also their ideas, and also very important, I want to thank all of you who took a whole day to join the event and to participate. We know that we had a little issue with our license with Adobe Connect because we weren't expecting this much participation, but we could solve it, and I hope it didn't ruin your day that much, and that you could actually really enjoy all the sessions and all the presentations together with us. The last thank you of the day, I really want to thank our technical support guys. Yeah, maybe they can show their faces so that you see who was sitting in this room the whole day to help all the speakers to make sure that all the microphones were on and off at the right time. So you see there Gerardo and Pedro. They're also from the RIPE NCC, so they were here the whole day to help everyone out. And before we go, I really would like to ask you to fill in the survey that you have on the right-hand side of your screen. So it's just a little link, and you please tell us what you thought about this event. Also give us suggestions, for example, for next topics, because we really want to continue doing this. And your feedback we will take into account, for example, when we organize the next event on IPv6, so that we make sure that, you know, everything runs more smoothly. Another thing is that all the videos, all the sessions were recorded, and we will share the videos on the agenda page, so on the website. They will be on YouTube, but we will share the links on our website as well. But you can also follow the RIPE NCC YouTube channel, and then you can see when it is updated, but we expect to do it in the next coming days or the latest next week. Yeah. So that was all. Thank you so much. And I hope you enjoyed it, and we hope to see you on the 6th of June when we talk about IPv6. Yeah, thank you very much, everyone.